Welcome, welcome, welcome to your Blue Feathered Stories. I'm your hostess, Carol, also known as Blue Thunderbird Woman. Well, we are continuing in this episode to have the conversation around our money stories. And I'm so excited to bring on Amy. You've met her before. You've been part of the beautiful Blessing to Birth, and I'm so excited to have her here with us again, so we can have a conversation around the pieces of us that need healing that we often don't talk about. You know, we easily talk about our healths, we talk about what ails us, what pains us in the physical body, the mental body, we talk about our childhood traumas and all of those things, but we don't ever talk about our stories around money and how that would have and play a role in our healing journey around our mind, body, and spirit. So I'm super excited to have Amy here with us again today. And although you cannot see her, but she's not alone. She's also with Oscar, the beautiful child I got to witness being birthed. And so we actually have two beautiful souls with us today. But Oscar's not talking yet, and so he's just sharing in the warm space of his mother. So welcome, Amy. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me here, Carol. It's a pleasure, and Oscar's happy too.
So we are sort of taking a look really deeply into our money stories, and I want to take you into the past. So as you reflect, looking at your childhood, what do you remember observing in your world around you as a small young girl, impressionable? What do you recall was sort of the money story? Anything come up for you, Amy?
Oh, yes. I was actually, when you brought this conversation up that you wanted to do this, sort of things just kind of flood in that moment. And one or a few things. One of the things is there was a lot of scarcity growing up. For a few reasons, we were sort of just in that kind of middle class. So we weren't like super wealthy at all. We were always like, we were kind of the family that like never could afford the latest things and had big TVs or, video games. I remember when Super Mario Brothers, came out, it was like the first one was so old by the time we were 16, 17 that a family of ours gave their old one to us. We were like, yay, because they got the latest one, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for a few different reasons, my mom was very, like, she was good in like recycling and like sort of saving and reusing things, but also not for usually the right reason. I think part of that is her mom, like my Oma, lived through the war. And I think a lot of that came passed down. It wasn't like kind of like save the planet or let's like reuse this just because it's still usable. It was like, we need to use this because we don't have enough money. There was a lot of that in our practice of our daily. It wasn't, not that those practices were bad,
Mm-hmm.
but the intention behind it wasn't like because it was abundant. It was because we were poor. And
Right.
the other reason why I remember grocery shopping with my mom a lot, and she was very, very, like, she had a list. She sometimes had a calculator, like, again. And part of that too, and just to be in full transparency, my dad had an addiction to alcohol, and she would, like my mom would say often, money would just like flow into the account, flow out. Like she couldn't stop it.
Mm-hmm.
And there were times because of that where she couldn't afford things. She couldn't go to the grocery store. And I remember, sort of witnessing certain things about like checks bouncing and seeing that stress on my mom. And so, yeah, it was really a scarcity mindset home because that was sort of the reality of what was happening. And also because of like practices in from years ago in wartime. And like just to tell you, my grandmother, my oma, she saved on water like crazy. She was in the city, Winnipeg. Actually, she had water, like hydro come and visit her because they couldn't understand why her hydro bill was so low. She would take like bath water and scoop it up. Like she only had like maybe a couple inches of bath water, not very much. She would not take showers because that meant a lot of water. She would scoop it up, put them in buckets. She used rainwater to wash her dishes. So there was lots of that, like, and again, it is a good practice to use what we have, but it wasn't because it was more of scarcity than, anything.
Wow. Yeah. That's an interesting, beautiful memory, actually. And you're right. Like there are things that we observed that our parents have done or our grandparents have done. And it was around scarcity. And it's really indicative of the wartime, definitely the wartime, and how that got passed on to our parents and how that still
Yeah.
trickled effect to us, right?
Too, it's also it was there was emphasis on the pride of doing those things.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? Like if you could save water, if you can be very, very frugal kind of thing. There was a lot of like that was a good thing. You were really good at scavenging money, or saving
Yeah.
money. So, but it kind of had the reverse effect.
Yeah, when we're witnessing that as a child, we don't really necessarily understand because we're looking at those that maybe are a little bit more affluent around us and they have all the latest gadgets and the latest Mario game and whatever. And as a child, we're watching our grandmother save water and reusing water or, whatever. So it's really kind of hard for us to sort of wrap our heads around from that childlike mind, trying to understand what the bigger picture is, right? Do you recall, was there ever a time in your childhood where you actually were allowed to earn money? And what was that like for you, if there's a memory there?
Yeah, like with my Oma and even at home we had allowance. We do our chores of the week. Every Saturday we would have three chores to do to pick from a list and then clean our room. And if we did that, we could get our allowance. As I got older, I did a lot of babysitting too. I mean, my omas, wash the walls or help with the garden, things like that. So, and that felt very good to do. Like it was, there was two things good about that. Yeah, like earning the money, but you also felt very good in being productive. My parents passed that down, but it was like the hard work, working with your hands and so forth. So there was like some good things in that.
Mm-hmm. Were you encouraged to save? Were you encouraged? Did your parents have a rule around if there was something that you wanted that was outside of the scope of need, where you were told, well, you're making money, you save for it, you buy it? Did you ever get any of that?
You know what? No, that's one thing. And in saying this, and in sharing these stories, I'm not at all in blaming or hold any intent to my parents at all.
Mm-hmm.
This is just the way we grew up. But no, like they didn't emphasize saving, though they had a bank account for us. I don't remember if it was like $1,500 or something. And in high school, we were allowed to use that. And oh my gosh, I think it disappeared very quickly. I don't even know. It's crazy. Like that's what kind of blows my mind too about like looking at my past history with money is like where did it all go? And what did I spend on like clothes and like and I don't even probably have any of those clothes like from way back when. But no, our parents didn't teach us to budget or like save or anything like that. Actually, kind of a funny money story here too. my dad is Aboriginal, and years ago on our treaties, Aboriginal peoples, there was, I don't know the whole story about this history, but you get $5 a year for being First Nation. And my dad came home one day and I think he was a little bit tipsy, but he came home. I think I was about 10 or 11. He hands me $5. And I was like, woohoo, what's this $5 for? Like, I already got my allowance, I already got this. He's like, you get $5 for being Indian. And I was like, what? Like, I didn't understand. He's like, yep, says the government gives you $5 a year. And I was like, okay. And that too, like, there's a whole history and stories down there of the First Nation and money stories, and because that didn't even exist in their world until the Europeans came. And so so yeah, it that's too is like, it plays a value on you, on your head kind of thing. And so yeah, there's a lot of things going on there.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting. And like that $5 today, what would you think that would be worth today in value?
It's actually this, believe it or not, it's actually the same. I can right now, and I actually was thinking this not too long ago, but right now I can go to my band office or and apply for, you can only apply to up so many years. So I maybe you get like a total of $50, but that's never changed, that $5.
Wow. Wow. Isn't that an interesting money story in itself? That might be a whole separate podcast, Amy.
Yeah, I know,
I
right?
need to go explore. Holy.
I
That
know.
that hasn't appreciated. I mean, yeah, don't even get me going on that one. Anyways.
Yeah, I gotta look into that. There's definitely another podcast for that because
Yeah, most definitely. So as you find yourself getting a little bit older and a little bit older, maybe did you ever get a job or did you ever work while you were in school?
I worked in the summer and it was mostly babysitting. I worked in restaurants. I did really well in a takeout restaurant and that was during school, in high school though. But we also grew up in the country, so getting around was a little difficult. And it wasn't until I had a vehicle and I think I was out, yeah, I was graduated already where I had like more of a more full-time job. And that was a whole journey too, like, because there's so much emphasis on, once you get out of school, you got to figure it all out. You got to have your career set, and you got to know what you're doing and where you're going and who you are. And that's the end, you know, and get married and have the kids and all of that. And I had like literally no clue what I wanted to do. And I just knew I wanted to help people. That's all I knew. And I started, and it's funny because I actually trained as a paramedic for quite a few years. That was gonna be my career. And I went really far because I loved health. I love to help people. All of a sudden, my life took a huge turn. I had met someone who was helping people in such a different way through a mission with outreach work. And I felt so good in doing that because I could help people in the health realm on the ambulance, but like for a very short time. And once they were out of the ambulance in the hospital, that was the end of it. And I felt that like a little bit unfulfilling. And because it was like, I don't even know if I did anything or, and when I started helping people on a different level of like internally and like in their communities, that's where I was like, hey, I love this. So, but that I did for free, believe it or not, for 16 years.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it was a mission, and I got my food, my shelter kind of thing, everything. And I loved that for many years until I burnt out and life again took another turn. So that's kind of how it went out of high school.
Yeah, yeah. There is a lot of there's definitely like And I don't know what it's like today with the teenagers and that, but I know for sure I definitely felt it at the age of 17 where I needed to have my shit together in order to know exactly where I was going, what I was doing, how I was going to do university, da 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 da. And there was these certain expectations. You know, you go, you get yourself a career, you make decent money, and you participate in the rat race.
Yeah.
It really is. Like it's about getting the car, getting the house, getting like putting your money towards things that materialistic possessions. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that. I'm just saying that that was the mindset is like we need to, you know, do A, B, C, D, E, F, G. But we had to decide what that was. And I think part of that is from the generation of our parents where you needed to decide because really when you look back and not that long ago in 1950 women were not allowed to work if they were married.
Wow.
They were not allowed to work if they were married. And if they had to work, they had to lie that they were not married if that was
Wow.
the situation. So that wasn't all that long ago, right? So we still are feeling the stresses definitely as women to make these decisions. And if you chose to go into the workforce, you were limited to your choices. You could be a nurse, a teacher. What was the other thing? A nurse, a teacher,
Secretary? Mm.
maybe a secretary. Yeah, definitely. But that's like really limited to your options, right?
Yeah.
So we felt those things growing up when we became teenagers, that pressure is like we were no longer, you know, we were sort of coming out of that where we needed I know for me, what was instilled in me was my mother was like, you do not want to be dependent on a man.
Mm.
Like that was something that was really strongly imprinted in me. And so it was like, go get yourself a degree, go get yourself a job that you don't never have to be dependent on a man. And so that was, you know, my mom was maybe a little bit more advanced in her time, but that was a lot of stress as a teenager to have to make this decision on what I was going to be doing for the rest of my life. Because not that long ago, when you made the decision to become a teacher or a nurse or a secretary, that's what you did for life. It was like a
Yeah.
life sentence, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of emphasis on money that you invest into those courses, into that teaching, that like once you decide that's it, because
Yes.
you don't want to waste that money. You don't want to waste this, you like, and it's like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, so yeah, that's quite something. Maybe that 1950, that's not too long ago at all.
No, not at all. Not at all. And I know that because I worked with a woman in Great West Life who had said to me she had gotten a job there. She had to lie that she was married. But that, you know, she had to lie that she was married. She had to lie that she was not married in order to get
Wasn't.
that job. Yeah.
My
Yeah.
goodness, eh?
Yeah. So going through those early years so you worked at a mission, which you made no money. So that's kind of interesting. So for you in that time, like, were you still living at home?
No, I was living at the mission. There was a small independent mission in Winnipeg, and we traveled across Canada, a little bit into the States. Um, this could be a whole podcast. I'm definitely going to write a book about my life one day because um I'm still like taking in that period of time. A lot of people thought I was a cult.
Mm-hmm.
And in some aspects it was, looking back. Nothing terrible happened to me there or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
But it was definitely outside the box in this world. And leaving a secure job like paramedics to missionary work was like, what are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
So I definitely had a lot of people concerned. Money in that time, obviously, like I didn't have any, though I had certain responsibilities, but the founder, money was always an issue. Like
Okay.
it was like, how are we going to get by next month? What are we going to do? And it's because we ran on donations, right? And so, and part of like my money story honestly has to be religion. I have to conclude religion in this because my mom too is very religious, and taking on like the martyrdom role, that poverty is very, what's the word I'm looking for? Poverty is very commended. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like living a life of poverty is a beautiful thing, you know, and it's, you know, you put on a pedestal kind of thing. And so money, and like money is the root of all evil, even though that's not the quote, it's the love
Mm-hmm.
of money. But
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, like I grew up too in a home where it was my mom was very religious, and I remember just hearing little comments too about people's life, like people who are rich, like, oh, I wouldn't live like that, or that's not really good, or, you know, like, oh, I'm not going to be fancy and wear earrings like that, or, you know what I mean? Like, just these little things that doing something good, feeling good in something, whatever it may be, whatever kind of value the world puts on it, whether, you know, it's diamonds or turquoise or whatever it is,
Yeah.
that's like, that's not the thing, it's the price tag, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it's bad because it's this much money. And but if it makes you feel good, who cares what the price tag is on it, kind of thing. And so yeah, there's just a lot of like sort of passive aggressive feelings toward people who are rich and people who like to make money and who are well off and so forth. And so the missionary work was more, I wouldn't say that I was commended on that work. I was, in the sense that I was living an extraordinary life, but again, it was like the money was just, it was hard, it was stressful. And so just to make a long story short, the founder had passed away in 2011, and another gal and I tried to continue it on, and it just us we just couldn't do it because financially it was so hard. Donations were just slipping away. I took on a full-time job as well as working there full-time. It was working around the clock basically, and I was putting my paycheck towards like what I could do to keep it going, and it just was not working. So I burnt out, totally
Mm-hmm.
burnt out. And so my money story up until that point was like, I don't know, I didn't know how to manage money. And I thought spending it on me was like a bad thing. And, you know, there was just a lot of things wrapped around money. And so, yeah, it was a lot during that time.
Yeah, most definitely. And also, again, that scarcity mindset too, right? Because you're working for a mission, and this entity that you're working for is constantly searching for the next dollar to keep it going from day to day. And isn't it interesting that we find ourselves living a life in the same thought process? You know, looking not sure how we're going to pay the bills the next month. And so how what you gathered from that money story, that experience has transposed itself into your own personal life, and it has continued that way. Question to you is, those money stories that you had as a young child and as a young adult, learning the things that you learned, what money meant through religion, through the mission that you, the work that you did, what did you realize today? Like, as you look back at that, what do you realize today? What is the story that doesn't serve you anymore, and how are you changing that?
So, yeah, that definitely, like the stress of money has always followed me. And I could say that when I was like, even if I had excess money and like new money was coming in, there was still stress around it. And it wasn't up and actually up until recently where I started to really be aware of that pattern. Um, like late, like just like almost outside myself, watching myself going, why are you worried right now? You know, like, why are you stressing?
Mhm.
And it was like all of a sudden this weight came off of me and I could breathe, because that has followed me, the stress of like conserving money, like scavenging it and like figuring out where the next dollar is coming from and like making sure we have enough until that point. Like that takes a lot of energy, work, and like a level of stress that was just like constantly. It wasn't until I recognized it, like literally dead stopped in my tracks, watching me go through this cycle. I'm going, okay, whoa, I've been here before. And why? And so our brain is so wired to follow the same path. And I'm learning about like your nervous system and neurological, like what's happening, where it can make new pathways.
Mhm.
It doesn't actually like it can bypass, you can make bypasses. And so I'm very visual. And so when I can actually see my little nervous system, going all crazy and like narrow it down, okay, whoa, I can visualize making like bypassing that now. And I'm like,
Mhm.
hey, Amy, look for evidence that you're okay. I literally have to tell myself and my nervous system, like, you're okay. And I
Mhm.
just take a deep breath and I slow right down. And I that's a daily thing. Like it's
Mhm.
it's getting better, like much, much better.
Mhm.
And with that too is my finances. Like it, I have always lived time for dollar my whole life. That's a other thing huge that's changed. I've always had the conventional job. Well, sorry, not the mission part, but been taught that's the way you earn money, right? Now that I'm like doing this on my own, basically, like, with the online business, with birth work, like it's so different. It's so different. And as an entrepreneur, you kind of have to live a little bit with this uncertainty, because you just never know, but you just have this trust because you're working from your heart.
Mhm.
You're moving from your head to your heart. And I've learned in human design that your heart center is where all the money blocks can come from.
Mhm.
And so when you start removing those blocks, I've learned also too, one big thing that's shifted within me is not to feel guilty for taking care of myself,
Mhm.
for spending the money on myself, for getting those things that quote unquote are vain or vanity, and feel good in them, not feel
Mhm.
guilty and shameful and all these things. Like that's not normal. And
Yes.
so being able to do that now is like a breath of fresh air. Being able to say to myself, I love having money for the fact of what it provides for me and my family. Like I couldn't say that before. I couldn't, because I'd like, even now, I'll just be honest, it tightens things up in me a little bit to say that. It's like, oh, like the old self,
Yeah.
Amy, that's so bad to say, kind of thing. But like a big part of me just like opens up because I see now money as a tool, a resourceful tool, just like a hammer, just like wood, just like any kind of tool that you have in your hand. What can you do with this tool that basically is how the world functions?
Mhm.
If, like if we lived in a perfect world, which we don't, but like if we lived in a perfect world, money probably would not exist.
Mhm.
And I remember you had shared too about the history of money. And I literally tell myself now all the time, like, and I repeat whenever I can. It's like, and it's going to sound, this is like my affirmations or whatever, but Amy Everett, and I say my name because
Mhm.
I need to, Amy Everett, you are deserving. Amy Everett, you are worthy. Amy Everett, good things happen to you. Amy Everett, you are allowed to make money and lots of it
Mhm.
because, like, and I just love feeling that. And so there's lots that shifted. And I will add one more thing because it's actually something that kind of came to me today, knowing this podcast, we were going to do it, is, imagine you have your family around you, your pets, your home, and you're putting money like in transferring it into different things to help your family, feed your kids, repair your home, whatever it may be. And I literally saw myself as like, again, kind of outside of myself, as a separate person and like a friend, and like, what, don't neglect her.
Ah, beautiful. Mm-hmm.
Like I actually got emotional thinking about looking at myself, and why would you neglect you?
Mm-hmm.
Like, why would you deprive you? Like, imagine if you did, which people do so often. Like,
Yes.
imagine if you could look at yourself as another person and go, oh my gosh, like why is she being neglected?
Mm-hmm.
Why is she being deprived?
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a huge shift for me today, was like, hey, no, I am like part of this beautiful connection, and I'm all part of the plan. So why
Mm-hmm.
would I neglect myself? Why would I deprive myself?
Yeah, that's like super important. And part of that coming to that is that, and I find this a lot with my clients and stuff, is that we feel that we're undeserving and that we have difficulties receiving. So the training that we have to do to say, hey, I'm as important as everybody else that I'm giving to here, creating money in order to live in the society that we live in, is like, that's important. We often hear from financial advisors or from people who are really good with money, is like, pay yourself first, right? Like, pay yourself first. And I myself personally started making that practice a couple of years ago, where I intentionally, like, every time I received money, I would be grateful for receiving it. And then I would take a portion of it and I would throw it into an account, even though it didn't stay there long. It was just the transaction of saying, I am worthy and paying myself first. And everybody
Yes.
else will get paid after me. And if I have to go grab from my self bucket, then I will. But I have the power to choose to or choose not to do that. Right. And there's just there's a shift that happens for us in that, because we tend to want to have to take care of everybody else's needs first, which is, part of what we're taught of. Right. And the reality is we actually have to take care of our needs first, so that we can take care of everyone else's needs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember you told me that, and I started to do that. And last month was the first month I had still just, even when it was like $30, I don't remember how much it was, but it was like, oh, that's mine, because like I've been doing that the whole time. And then every once in a while, okay, I don't have enough for this, so I'll just use this and I'll put it towards that. But it was the first month where I was like that. And that's where actually, because my bills were paid, I wish I could like go on and on with this podcast, because that journey from that moment, we like, from entrepreneurship, from, like, I'm not working, I'm full-time with, or overtime with my babies, and there's no question that I'm going back to work, especially them so young. So this journey of entrepreneurship, we've always been like, hey, we'll do this and we'll pay off this, and like, it's always been kind of like this figuring things out. And last month the bills were all caught up. Like, we had food in the fridge, in the cupboards. And I remember like I was like stressing and constricting. And I remember looking at my bank account and like, wait, like, Amy, hold up, like, breathe, and it was like, whoa, okay, there's the pattern. There it
Mm-hmm.
is.
Yeah.
Because everything was okay. And yet I was still in this like, oh no, no, no. And so, yeah, just to see that little amount, and it'll grow. I know it'll grow. It's shifting, right?
Yeah.
So I love that.
Yeah. Beautiful. Beautiful. So if you were to give any gems to anyone out there that has some really, big, small, whatever money stories, lack money stories, whatever it is for them, like, what would be the nugget that you would really want to share with them to help them start to shift and 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 either take action or see things differently, or just to heal that money wound? Like, what gem would you share with them?
Oh, that's a good question. Because it's a journey. We have all gifts and talents inside of us that like are detrimental to the impact it can make in this world. Each unique, there is no one in this world that doesn't have, their own unique gift to give. Everyone does. And it's meant to be shared. It's meant to be out there. It's meant to explode out of you. And we've been so much in this cycle to break the cycle, in a sense, to start. That journey doesn't happen overnight. It takes tiny little steps, pivots, and so forth. I would say, honestly, two things. Read the book, The Surrender Experiment. That book changed my life because I was in that, I was 1 month postpartum. I just had my baby and I was reading this book in the middle of the night because of breastfeeding. And it was all about being open to life's experiences. We so easily want to contract and close ourselves off and build the walls. But in that book, it shares about how you to be open. The moment I was like, okay, because I knew, again, a month in postpartum, there was still 11 months to go for my mat leave, but I knew I wasn't going back to work. I had no plan B, no safety net, no nest egg, nothing. And I needed a plan and fast. And looking back, I literally see how I grabbed life by the horns. I made a decision. I'm like, okay, this is it. I'm changing the story. And that's when an opportunity landed in my lap that literally changed my life. And so it changed a whole bunch of stories. That it was like this evolution of like breaking and obliterating the limiting beliefs and old stories within me that set me off into this amazing world that I live in right now. And so I would say, never think that you're too deep to turn things around. Whether it's debt, whether it's shame, guilt, there's so much wrapped around money. So never think you're in too deep to change things around, because there's always a way. Always a way. And once you've decided there's a way, be open to what comes through your path to start pivoting in your life.
Beautiful. Love it. Very empowering words for sure. Thank you so much, Amy. Anything else?
Welcome.
Any more spunda coming? Does that feel good?
And you know what? Because that decision, honestly, made me realize what I'm worthy of, what I deserve.
Beautiful. And I do want to share with our listeners that in you making that decision, you have graciously impacted so many other people's lives. In fact, you and I would not be here today had you not made that decision. So it really does have this massive ripple effect. And I want people to understand that people come in our paths for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. And wherever you are in your money story, you just really need to make a decision and surrender to it and trust. Have the faith, What we would say is tap into that hummingbird medicine, drinking the sweetness of life, because it's there. They go on these epic journeys without ever knowing whether or not they'll ever have another drink from a flower again. They travel so far. It doesn't even make sense that they can do what they do. And so they are a perfect teacher for us to really just say, you know what? I'm going to allow the mystic to take care of it all, and I'm going to have faith, and I'm saying yes, and I'm jumping in, I'm surrendering, and I am going to freaking change my money story, because
Yes.
I choose no longer to give it the power that it's been given. And so
Yes.
it really is It really is a matter of changing that story, but you have to be willing to surrender. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And what comes to mind right now too is we have all these old stories, whether they're stories that were as we were growing up or even beyond, what our parents went through and so forth. And yes, we inherited those old stories, but there's that quote that we might have inherited a lot of intergenerational trauma, but we also inherited a lot of their strengths. And
Absolutely. Yeah.
yes, and we cannot forget that. And in your
Mm.
tree line, let's say your great grandchildren are looking at your tree of life and they look at when you were born and they can say, that's where it changed.
Mm.
That's where everything changed.
Yeah.
And that is the power of our ancestors and what we have in our hands right now of what we could do with our own life. So
Love that. And you know what? The word that comes to me too, what we inherited from our ancestors is the resilience.
yes.
Their stories, their trauma, their experiences, they have learned to be resilient in so many ways. And so at some point, all that goodness comes into us and we are the cycle breakers. We just decide that we're going to set our ancestors free and we're just going for it. And so there's very much a movement right now. I feel it deeply in my bones that we are all coming together in this community and just saying enough. We're changing it now. Right. Yeah. Thank you so, so much, Amy, for joining me in this beautiful podcast series. And I look forward to having you again on many other topics as we move on. But thank you so much for joining and sharing your very vulnerable stories around your money, how you are healing that and how it is a work in progress. So thank you so, so much for joining. And for all you listeners out, yeah, you're welcome. And for all the listeners out there, we have some incredible, more beautiful stories from other soul sisters that are coming in. And so stay tuned as we move through our beautiful money series. All right. Blessings.
Yes, blessings.